Many of my friends sacrificed their lives so we can live like folks do in Europe.
The harvest clearly depends on the flow of migrants.
We do what everyone does. We work. We earn money and pay taxes.
It's not our fault that we're predominantly white working-class men around here. We want our own place back.
Right away, everyone's knee-jerk reaction is, close the borders. But these people will reach their destination. And when they do, what happens then?
Europe wouldn't be what it is without the work of millions of immigrants. They're a big part of its history. Today, the continent is confronted with its biggest wave of migration since the end of World War II. Millions of people have fled the war in Ukraine. On the one hand, Europe and Europeans are welcoming these refugees from the East with open arms. On the other, for years it has closed its doors to migrants arriving from the South, turning the continent into a militarized fortress. Which migrants, then, are allowed to cross the EU's closed borders? This is the big question that divides Europe and its inhabitants. It's not just a humanitarian issue. More than ever, Europe needs immigrants to breathe new life into an aging continent. For most Europeans, Russia's invasion of Ukraine came as a shock. Faced with a massive humanitarian crisis, Europe reacted promptly. Volunteers from across the continent took action.
You can sleep in tent 1, 2, or 3.
Within days, countless aid structures were set up to help relocate refugees across the entire continent.
Where are you going? To Prague.
The EU was ready to help. Member states gave refugees the opportunity to work and attend school right away. Neighboring Poland remains especially committed. Since the war began, Krakow's population alone has risen by more than 15%. Most every family in Poland is helping Ukrainian refugees in one way or another.
In Kyiv.
In Kyiv?
In Kyiv too.
Did they encircle the school?
They shot down a rocket today and it hit a residential building again. And Brovary is 5 minutes away from me. Can you imagine?
That's horrible.
Yeah.
I heard. Everything will be all right.
It will.
Agnieszka Widacka worked for a museum in Krakow when, on the second day of the war, she drove to the Ukrainian border and brought back 2 busloads of refugees.
We store our bedding here. We desperately need cabinets. Come on in.
She and some friends turned a former university building into a makeshift hostel. It provides accommodation and support for up to 200 refugees, mainly women and children, before they continue on their journey.
The interior isn't perfect because it was set up in 2 days with money from private donors. Maybe that's why it has this homey feel to it. We're still working on it, but it's still the early days. All these women dream of going back home. They've come here with very little luggage and only brought the basics. They all hope the war will be over soon. I just hope that other Europeans continue to sustain their goodwill in case the war lasts longer, which I'm dreading. We may need their compassion and open hearts for much longer.
Ukrainian refugees are benefiting from a surge of empathy and solidarity. But Europe isn't always as welcoming to those who seek its help. Crossing borders into the EU is proving increasingly difficult. Many member states have built walls. Since the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989, more than 1,000 kilometers of new barriers have been erected in Europe. between Greece and Turkey, between Hungary, Croatia, and Serbia, in Ceuta and Melilla, between Morocco and Spain, and in 2021, 187 kilometers of barbed wire were added between Belarus and Poland. Here, migrants are constantly turned away. It's not just the walls and fences that keep potential intruders out. Satellites and drones monitor the waters in and around the EU. This is the River Evros. 500 kilometers long, it constitutes a natural border between Greece and Turkey. It's also one of the most dangerous entry points into Europe. The river is constantly watched. The Greek police and army patrol it with the help of Frontex, the European Border and Coast Guard Agency. But this divisive security comes at a cost. The EU and Greece have invested billions of euros in reinforcing border controls. The latest development? This 40-kilometer-long steel barrier, meant to keep out any would-be intruders. In recent years, thousands of people have tried to get across the Evros border. Many of them have also fled war in Syria, Afghanistan, Yemen, or Ethiopia. And they aren't welcomed everywhere with open arms.
Illegal immigrants are a daily problem. Unfortunately, a big problem. They shouldn't be allowed in at all. I'm a member of the National Guard. There are many of us here. Anytime the army needs us, we're ready. We learn about weapons, how to shoot, everything that's needed. Without pay, of course. We do it for our country and for our families. If illegal immigrants cause any trouble, we know what to do. But hopefully, that won't happen.
Kostas Sahariadis is a farmer and cafe owner in a village near the river Evros. As a child, he lived for several years in Germany when his parents couldn't find work in Greece. He knows himself what it means to be an immigrant. But for him, there's no comparison.
We were economic immigrants. Germany was looking for workers. We didn't sneak into the country. If we'd been unable to find work, we would have come back home. We worked there, paid taxes like anyone else. We didn't steal or anything. I left here when I was in 5th grade. In the beer hall, I'd hear Germans say, pardon the expression, the f***ing Greeks are here. I also experienced racism at work. When abroad, you're always a foreigner. That never stops. At some point, you will experience racism. Here in Greece, I feel like I've found my family again, my home country.
Ils arrivent en Belgique au rythme d'environ 200 par semaine. Ils sont actuellement 6000. Ce sont des paysans, parfois des artisans, des commerçants ou des ouvriers.
Western Europe's post-war economic boom would scarcely have been possible without its so-called guest workers. Mainly from Turkey and Greece, they were only meant to stay for a while. Yet, many settled permanently and brought their families. These guests became fellow citizens, which wasn't easy for either side.
My parents came to Germany in 1968 and 69. My father arrived in Munich in 68, then went on to Cologne. My mom came 6 months later, as there were problems with her documents. That's how life for the Yurtseven family started in Cologne.
My dad came to Germany for the first time in 1958 as a guest worker in a factory. His dream was always to earn money here and go back home to Naples in a Mercedes. Then people would say, "Look at Penino, he's made it. He's a big man now." Unfortunately, that didn't happen because my dad still lives here. But still, I feel both Neapolitan and from Cologne, both equally a part of me. We were quite the group of kids. Turks, Tunisians, Moroccans, Greeks, Spaniards. To me, we were all the same. It was only much later that we started to feel uncomfortable here as foreigners. They called me spaghetti eater or macaroni eater.
My parents told me, you need to be 10 times more German than the Germans for them to accept you.
That
was the summer of 1989. Rossi and Unda had beatboxed, and I rapped lyrics by LL Cool J. And then one of us said, let's start a rap group. So we founded Microphone Mafia right on the spot.
We loved this music because we could identify with the people who made it. You didn't need any expensive instruments, just pen and paper.
The 16-year-olds from that place are still in us somewhere, and their dreams haven't changed. To move to the music, live in sync with it. We realized right away that rap has this power to reach people. Young and old people identify with our lyrics, with our music. So we said, okay, let's rap about our lives, about the stuff we weren't able to talk about.
Germany gave me and my parents a lot 30 years ago, including a certain way of thinking, some of the traditional, a bit from the left, a bit from the right, but also a bit out of the box, because there are so many cultures here.
For years, they expected us to integrate. How much more can we do? We go to school, we work, our kids go to school here. Our parents did so much for this country, yet they're still saying, you must integrate, and that's been passed on to the next generation. But now there are people traumatized by war, suffering and death. So we as a majority society, to which I believe we now belong, should welcome people first.
Don't jump! Don't jump!
Many men and women are willing to do anything to reach Europe. But the reality is, only a tiny fraction of them make it. Every year, thousands of migrants drown trying to cross the Mediterranean. More than 20,000 between 2014 and 2021. A tragedy that Europe has grown accustomed to. These dots represent the number of bodies that have been recovered, though many finds are never registered. Despite the dangers and all the efforts to discourage them, some migrants do manage to reach Europe's shores. Seydou Diop is one of them. Originally from Senegal, he passed through Libya before reaching Spain by boat.
Somos nosotros que estamos recogiendo.
We're the ones who pick the fruit. It's the reality you see here. Everyone picking fruit is an immigrant. Everything that you eat and enjoy at home with your families is picked by people who are suffering. Just so you know, just look at all of this. People receive miserable wages and suffer. They don't have decent housing. People are living under plastic sheets in places made from wooden pallets. In the winter, it's freezing cold, and in summer, scorching hot. You can't ever relax like that. How shameful. Everyone prefers to look the other way, as if this didn't exist. That's the reality. They could at least build alternative housing, because there are tons of solutions better than this one. We deserve respect, to be treated with dignity and a bit of humanity. This is the industrial park. Spanish society should understand that we are contributing too. We do what everyone does. We work. We are earning money and paying taxes.
Seydou Diop is a member of ASNUSI, an association that provides aid and advice to migrants. It also campaigns for better working and living conditions.
If ASNUSI can build a shelter to house 40 men and women, then the authorities and the politicians could do even more. It's a gesture to show they have no more excuses.
Conditions on some farms in southern Europe are reminiscent of those in the days of slavery. Cheap workers for cheap food in rich Europe. But luckily, there are farms where labor relations are more equitable. On Bele Gonzalez's farm, migrant workers are treated with respect.
When I was in school, there was a migratory workforce coming from within Spain. My father had a team from Seville, from the villages. They came just to pick strawberries. Now there's just a small percentage of Spanish workers. The rest are from Mali, Morocco, Portugal, and Bulgaria. How's it going? Is the fruit okay?
Yes, more or less.
Is a lot of it bad?
Yes, a lot's bad.
A ton?
A ton.
What do we do then? Paint them black?
Paint them?
Yes. Some 75 or 80% of the workers are not from Spain. The harvest clearly depends on the flow of migrants, on the agreements that the countries have made, and how this is being handled geopolitically.
20% of workers in Spain from the agricultural sector come from other countries, mainly from outside the EU. The statistics are similar in many other member states. What would Europe do without migrant workers? They're the backbone of its economy. Caregivers, cooks, couriers, doctors, IT specialists. There's also another argument to be made for immigration. Europe is aging, and demographers are sounding the alarm. Soon, there won't be enough young people in Europe to ensure its prosperity and standard of living. A decade ago, 4 workers secured the pension of 1 retiree. By the year 2060, there will be just 2 working people for every retiree. This ticking demographic time bomb poses a threat to every country in Europe. Projections show that if Germany wants to maintain growth and preserve its social systems, it needs to take in 400,000 migrants a year. That's why, since 2013, the country has welcomed some 2.6 million refugees. But integrating them is not always easy for the newcomers or their host country. Both need to be open to what can be a long process. In Berlin, the restaurant Be an Angel is a project set up to promote integration. Run by a charity, it was founded by former journalist Andreas Töke.
Einer meiner Standardsprüche ist hier, ihr seid alle hier meine Rente.
My standard line is, you're here to pay my pension. I'm the typical old white German male. I'm 61 and reliant on the next generation to keep me comfy in my old age.
Alter zu versüßen. Be an Angel ist 2015.
Be an Angel was founded in 2015 due to the humanitarian emergency situation and lack of support in Berlin, which has since developed even further. We've placed 900 people in apprenticeship programs and around the same number in jobs. Our aim is empowerment. We want people to be able to live their own lives without our help.
Ihr eigenes Leben führen können.
We have seating for 110 people. We have 7 trainees. Right now, our team consists of 16 people from 10 nations. We only work with refugees.
Hello, Imran. Hello. Hi.
The war in Syria forced us to flee. After we settled into refugee housing, I started learning German. I then applied for official papers and got them.
Salam. Hello. Salam, Siham.
How's work? Everything okay? I missed you. Did you miss me?
We missed you too.
I registered at a language school and needed to reach B1 and B2 levels. Any German certificates go a long way here. I looked for a suitable career. And cooking was my passion. I started working here, making desserts for the restaurant.
How did you get on with the interviews? Were they okay?
Yes, okay and easy.
But you're still not happy?
No, because I'm 34 years old. I graduated 2 months ago, which means I'm a young chef now. So I'll only be paid what a young chef earns, which is disappointing.
Ah, yes, I understand.
I have experience and a certificate that shows I've done an internship here. And I think 2 years' experience should be enough to get a good starting salary. We'll see. I'll keep trying.
In the spring of 2022, Andreas Töke and his team began bringing Ukrainian refugees who'd fled to Poland and Moldova to Germany. For years, people from countries bordering Eastern Europe have immigrated to the EU, but until now, for other reasons. This footage was shot in the summer of 2021 at the Budomierz checkpoint on the Ukraine-Poland border. Every day, thousands of Ukrainians lined up to go to work in Poland. It shows, even before the war broke out, how close ties were between the two countries. Six months later, Ukrainians were lining up again, this time to flee Putin's army and to regain their lost freedoms and safety. Things can change incredibly quickly. Within the EU, people move from one country to the next without giving it much thought. It's easy to forget that this freedom is an achievement, and that the free movement of peoples is one of the pillars of the European ideal. One that's also fostered decades of economic growth.
In 1999, the Erasmus program finally arrived in Romania. I applied for it and managed to get a scholarship.
Oana Bogdan, a Romanian architect living in Belgium, is one of those who've benefited from the idea of a unified Europe.
I didn't know what leaving Romania for a year meant back in 1999. It meant tons of paperwork with lots of photocopies, medical tests and other things to get my visa. The whole process was so humiliating and so tedious that when I left, it was such a relief. And I said to myself, thank God you're out. I didn't want to go back. That's how mad I was at Romania. But I left behind my family and very many friends. I did miss the people, yes. When I arrived in Leuven, they didn't know much about Romania and looked at me oddly. They associated Romanians with beggars and thieves, dangerous people who wanted to harm Belgians. And they'd say, "You're from Romania? But you've got blue eyes." I've always found that sad. That all changed when Romania joined the EU. Now that Belgians have met more Romanians, not just beggars and thieves, I believe their opinion has changed. Besides, nobody in Brussels was actually born here.
The EU's most diverse city, around 75% of Brussels residents are foreigners or have foreign roots.
You're not viewed as a foreigner in Brussels. You're just one of its inhabitants. As a state, Romania is still not able to protect its citizens. Belgium is. And I felt free because for the first time in my adult life, I knew I was safe. The very fact of being European should offer us this protection and the feeling that we can live our lives with dignity.
2007 was a crucial year for Romania. Along with Bulgaria, the country joined the European Union. Many Romanians immediately took advantage of this opportunity and left their homeland.
Almost 4 million Romanians have emigrated. That's a huge number. Romanian immigrants care for the elderly in Italy, work on farms all over Europe. On all the construction sites I visit, I hear people speaking Romanian. These are the Romanian people who nurture, build and feed Europe. But there are also many Romanian intellectuals who left to pursue their careers abroad. For instance, when I go to any hospital or clinic in Brussels, I always see the name of some Romanian doctor.
Some leave, others stay. Such mass exoduses of workers have left ghost towns and deserted areas all over Europe. Here, in red, we can see the regions that are losing the most inhabitants, mainly in Eastern Europe. People are moving to more prosperous areas, with more promising job markets, in blue on the map. It's especially grim in Bulgaria, which has lost 15% of its population in the last 20 years. And it's predicted that, by 2040, over 30% of Bulgarians will have left their country, making it the fastest population decline of any country during peacetime.
This village is located in southeastern Bulgaria, near the Bulgaria-Turkey border. In the past, there were 1,200 inhabitants, but as of now, unfortunately, there are just 35 people left. Unfortunately, for villages located far from the cities, that's what happens. It's the Great Migration. People die, but no babies are born. That's all there is to it.
There was a pub where we all gathered. They threw great parties. But now there are no celebrations, no parties, nothing. Everyone stays at home. There's nowhere to go. No one to say a few words to. No one to tell any stories to. Not a soul in sight. I have a son who's now living in France. He comes here once every 3 months. That's it.
That's life.
Feeling forgotten and abandoned is a frustration that doesn't just eat away at people in Southern and Eastern Europe. This feeling of abandonment also exists in economically troubled parts of Western and Northern Europe too. Like in Redcar, in the northeast of England, which has fallen on hard times.
So the courtshome area of Redcar is in the top 3% of deprivation in the country. We've had numerous amounts of unfortunate happenings over the years that have made our area sort of creep up those deprivation scales. The steelworks have been around for around about 170 years. Unfortunately, in 2015, with like large stocks of steel, and unfortunately, it died. And my dad was in the steel industry for 36 years, and I've got friends who have been in there for 30-odd years. It really dented a lot of men's confidence who have, had been made the finest steel in the world, and now, they were going to be told to go on courses to be baristas and, make coffee and sandwiches for, some of these chains. And it just devastated people. It really did devastate people.
Frankie Wales runs a charity that's trying to bring a ray of hope back to the people of Redcar. The former boxer has made his boxing club a pillar of his organization. The classes are very popular with the local youngsters. There's not much else for them to do in town. At Codham Hall, Frankie Wales organizes a variety of events that provide entertainment and good cheer. Most people here feel far removed from what's happening in the major cities. In 2016, the majority of Redcar's residents voted for Brexit.
37.
Brexit was very important for us. 71% of the people in this town voted to leave. People are at the point where they were just like, nobody's listening here, so we need a change. And I believe that's what happened. And as I said, I'm not an economist, but if I give the European Union £1 and they give me 70 pence back, I'd go, hang on a minute, where's that 30 pence going? So I'm quite happy for us to spend our own money, make our own laws. We want the industries to come back. We want our own place back.
Low pay and a lack of jobs. Across Europe, people in disadvantaged regions feel neglected and let down by their governments and elected officials. Some politicians target these fears and frustrations. Here, anti-immigrant rhetoric finds receptive ears. Its slogans and policies divide not just communities, but all of Europe itself. Still, Poland is an example of how quickly things can change. After it joined the EU in 2004, many Poles left to work in Britain or other member states where wages and standards of living were higher. But many have since returned, and not just because of Brexit. Business is booming in Poland. In 2021, it had the 9th largest economy in all of Europe. The city of Łódź once known as the Manchester of Poland, exemplifies this transformation. Kasia Halas is one of the many immigrants who've returned home to be part of this upswing.
I was working at a daycare centre, and I thought if I were ever to go back to Poland, I'd open one like that for Polish children, to show them how to learn languages and how much fun daycare can be. So fun that the kids wouldn't even want to go home. This was the main reason why I came back. I wanted to start my own business, show others what I'd learned in my years abroad and bring it back to Poland. But it didn't work out, unfortunately. So I've ended up at a barber's shop.
But Poles returning from abroad can't make up for the labor shortage caused by the economic boom. Poland's ruling Law and Justice Party, which is traditionally very anti-immigration, was forced to turn to neighboring Ukraine. When these scenes were filmed, nearly every employee at Halas's barbershop was Ukrainian.
I was studying in Ukraine, but I quit because I didn't see my future there. That's why I moved here together with my girlfriend. She talked me into coming, and we came here together to study.
Denis is one of the many Ukrainians who come to Poland to work and finance their studies.
At first I worked at McDonald's. Even the worst job is still better here. You can live a normal life, even on the lowest wages. Not like in Ukraine. I have come here to stay. I didn't come just to work and go back later on. I feel I'm a bit of both, Polish and Ukrainian.
Polak i jako Ukrainiec, no w sensie na pół. Sorbet.
Okej. Proszę bardzo, jabłko mięta. O, dziękuję. I do kubeczka to miało być jeszcze raz?
Śmietanka. Dziękuję.
To, że też same Słowianie. To, że same Słowianie i mamy chyba te same...
We are all Slavs. We see things the same way, have similar views. Ukrainians have more in common with Poles than with Russians. Poles orient themselves to the West and their way of life. Ukraine is not like that yet. Poland is more advanced now that it is part of the EU, compared to Ukraine, which is still hoping to get into the EU.
In the summer of 2021, life in Poland seemed full of promise for Yulia and Denis. 7 months later, Russia's invasion of Ukraine changed everything. While Yulia was desperately trying to get her family out of Ukraine, Denis was nowhere to be found. His cell phone wasn't working. Ukrainians fleeing their country have now been granted temporary protection in the EU. This emergency measure gives all Ukrainian citizens the right to live and work in any EU country.
I think many Ukrainians will stay in Europe, but many will come back to rebuild Ukraine, resurrect it. Our people are dying just so that we can live freely, not like under that tyrant in Russia.
We'll take meal and bathroom breaks en route.
Great, thanks. We want to live like people in Europe do, freely, in a democratic country under the rule of law, not some kind of mob rule. We want to be law-abiding. We want to work to rebuild Ukraine. There's no doubt that we want to live like in Europe. Many of my friends sacrifice their lives so we can live like folks do in Europe. Not like in that evil empire. Life without democracy and freedom isn't an option. We will live in Europe. And that's why. That's why our families are fighting this war.
People will always move in search of security, freedom, and a better life, both within and outside of Europe. Yet migration changes not just migrants' lives, but things in their host countries too.
Pentru mine, emigrarea a însemnat o salvare.
For me, emigration was my salvation. I dare say I was privileged. But in the meantime, over the past 20 years, I've come to the conclusion that this privilege works both ways, meaning that those welcoming the immigrants enjoy this privilege too. They're a revitalizing force that helps and heals our society. I consider this a good thing.
Europe must rethink its immigration policies from a humanitarian and practical point of view. The crisis in Ukraine has shown that the EU can welcome large numbers of refugees swiftly and efficiently, rather than leaving them in limbo for years. Europe needs to find new ways to receive and integrate people. These migrants have rights and want to be seen as future fellow citizens. Many are already living and working on the continent. They are Europeans too.